chicken nugget. I've read 46 books so far this year. These are my 5-star reads. So let's talk about them. So I actually wrote them all down in my journal. And I counted that I've got 14 5-star reads, which is pretty good. This isn't including any of my 4 or my 4.5s. This is purely just the 5 stars. So the first one that I've got on here is I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I actually just finished this book. It was the last book that I completed and it was amazing. I grew up watching iCarly and just like Nickelodeon, and so I knew who Jeanette McCurdy was. And I remember seeing this book come out, what was it, like 2 years ago maybe? And so I'd always known about it and it was kind of on my radar, but I just randomly decided to read it the other day and it was just amazing. If you aren't super into non-fiction, but maybe you want to branch out into non-fiction, then I would highly recommend reading a biography or a memoir of someone that you know or someone that kind of just interests you, because it's so fascinating to me to learn about someone's life. She talks about some really hectic stuff in this book, so trigger warning, look up all of the sensitive topics. Kind of in the name, like she talks about all these really sensitive topics, but also with this element of humor. I think it's just her personality coming through. I don't know whether or not she actually wrote the book herself or if she had anyone like give her a little bit of assistance, but I genuinely feel like her personality does kind of shine through the writing. It's like you can almost, I could hear her narrating it, and I'm pretty sure that for the audiobook version she actually does narrate it, but I didn't listen to it. Anyways, absolutely amazing book. The thing that I love about autobiographies as well is you just get perspectives from different people that you've never met but that you may know or that you have an interest in, and on topics that you otherwise would have no clue about. It's just so interesting. And yeah, I would highly recommend that book. It's amazing. I'm gonna say that about every single one of these books because they're all 5 stars, but anyways, the next book that I read was The Women by Kristen Hanna. I've read a couple of Kristen Hanna books so far, and I loved this book. I'm gonna say that this was my favorite Kristen Hanna book. It was just so beautiful. I think it's roughly about 500-ish pages, maybe give or take. And I flew through it. I think I finished it in 2 or maybe 3 days when we were in Japan, and I was just glued to the book. I was reading it on my Kindle and I was reading it on my phone, like any chance that I could. It was just amazing. It's a story, a historical fiction, like I think most of, oh my god, my door's about to slam. Moving on. Like most of Kristen Hanna's work, she likes to write historical fiction, and this one was centered around women, one in particular who served in the Vietnam War as a nurse, and of course all the things that happened through her time serving in the war and then also after her time in the war. It was just amazing. I didn't have a lot of knowledge prior to reading this about the Vietnam War. I only knew like super basic information, and of course with the story a lot of it is sensationalized, so it's not like it's necessarily a piece of work that you would like take notes and all that sort of thing from. Like you'd have to do more research in order to have a conclusive understanding of this topic, but it is a great way to get an idea of how people might have felt and why they would have made certain decisions back in the day. again, I would highly recommend, if you want to delve into historical fiction, Kristen Hanna is a great author. The Nightingale was great. I've also read Firefly Lane, The Great Alone. I think that's all of her books that I've read. I have got another one of her books ready to go on my Kindle, but like the thing about Kristen Hanna is that like pretty much all of the books that I've read so far have been at least a 4-star. So I know that her books, what I'm hoping for is that they won't let me down. They haven't so far. They've always been amazing. And that's kind of the general consensus when it comes to her work. So yeah, absolutely amazing. I would reread that book for sure. And if I was to recommend any of Kristen Hanna's work, I would recommend The Women. The next one that I rated 5 stars was Martia by Kaveh Akbar. Hopefully I didn't butcher that, but if I did, my apologies. I again had this one on my radar for a little while, not that long, because I saw it on TikTok and I saw a lot of people talking about it on YouTube. And I walked into my library and I randomly just saw it on the shelf and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna pick it up. And I'm so glad that I did. Again, it's just one of those books where you get a real good idea of what someone in a certain social class or whatever might experience, what they might go through, the certain problems that they may encounter and how they may deal with them. That's what I love about literature. It's just, even though it's fictional, you genuinely become so connected to the characters and it's just amazing. I do understand why this book had a lot of hype. The actual writing, the prose was so beautiful. It was one of those books where I would read a passage and I would stop and I'd take a photo and I'd send it to my friends and I'd want to talk about it. It's just such a beautifully written book. And it's not that big either. I think it was like 300-ish pages. So it's just a standard size book, but it was just so beautiful. I absolutely love that book. The next one that I rated 5 stars was From Here to the Great Unknown by Lisa Marie Presley. Now this one I did not have on my radar at all. I wasn't planning on reading it. I had absolutely no intention of ever picking it up. Not because of any reason. Like, I know of course about Lisa Marie Presley because she's Elvis's daughter, but also because she was married to Michael Jackson at one point. And before I read this book, Declan and I had actually just finished watching oh my gosh, what's it called, Daisy Jones and the Six. We had just finished watching that, and one of the actors is Riley Keough, which is Lisa Marie's daughter. Anyways, and I picked up this book. I can't even really remember why. I think I just wanted like a non-fiction, like just something, and so quickly became wrapped up in the way that she would tell the story. I was listening to it and also reading it. The audiobook, actually no, I think I just listened to this one. Or maybe I did read it a little bit. I can't remember. I do definitely remember reading this one on audio. I mean, listening to it on audio. It's narrated by Riley Keough and also Julia Roberts. So Julia Roberts narrates Lisa Marie Presley's chapters, pardon me, and Riley Keough narrates her own chapters. So it kind of goes back and forth between like mother-daughter, and it was just so interesting. Goodness me, that lady lived just such a hectic life. And yes, like you can see why that would have happened, and what would have led her and presented opportunities to her. But some of the things that she was saying, I was like, damn, that is crazy. Again, it was one of those books where I finished it in like 2 days because I just wanted to keep listening to what was happening. I wanted to know what was coming next. And I knew that Lisa Marie had passed away. When was it? 2023? Maybe, give or take. And I had a really strong interest because I love Michael Jackson, and I kind of wanted to see whether or not she would discuss her marriage with Michael Jackson. I wanted the tea. And she did actually discuss her marriage with Michael Jackson, but she also discussed her marriages with other people and her relationship with her own mother and with her children and all this sort of thing. So I learned so much from her retelling. It was just awesome. And again, I never would have picked it up, and I'm so glad that I did. It was just awesome. I genuinely think that for non-fiction, biographies and memoirs are my favorite kind of non-fiction to read, because even though it is non-fiction, it still has the capability to touch your heart. It's just, I love it. Then the next book that I'm going to talk about is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Now this one, I know that it is a series as well, so you can watch it as an adaptation. I heard about this book from a TikTok, and I remember this person just saying that it was like insane, and they were in the middle of reading it and they couldn't wait to finish it, yada yada yada. All the good things that you want to hear, right? And I had an interest in it because it had a thriller kind of aspect, but it's definitely more of a psychological thriller. I love typical thrillers, but this one was definitely like teetering more towards psychological aspect, but I still really enjoyed it. I think that this is probably the first book first psychological thriller that I have rated 5 stars. Another really good psychological thriller is this one here, The Secret History by Donna Tartt. If you haven't read this book, read this book because it's awesome. Anyways, but Dark Matter, it was just such like a mind fuck. Like, I can see why it would succeed so well as being a on-screen adaptation, because it was just like, some of the things that were happening, I was like, this is actually hectic. Like, this kind of makes my stomach churn a little bit, but I want to know what's going to happen next, but I'm also kind of bracing myself. The main character, he pretty much has doppelgangers. That's not a spoiler because you find that out like within the first couple of pages of the book. He has a doppelganger, and the doppelganger wants to take his life and pretty much swap. And there's like alternate realities and like all this sort of thing. It's fucking insane, and I can't really say too much without spoiling it, so I'll leave it at that. But it was a really great book, highly would recommend. And I haven't seen the adaptation, but based off of the book, I would like to see it. So the next one is Moonwalk by Michael Jackson. Again, I really like Michael Jackson. I love Michael Jackson. I've always loved him ever since I was a child, so he's always been a very strong interest of mine, and it was really interesting to read about this from a different era of his life. The book was written, I'm pretty sure, in the 80s or very early 90s. So it was kind of during like his bad era, hence the name Moonwalk. And yeah, it was just so interesting. The book, it was co-written with, I can't even remember what their name was. I'll insert it on the screen here. It was co-written, so the actual writing itself wasn't anything spectacular, and I wouldn't necessarily say that his personality shines through completely, but nevertheless it was still great to read as a fan of Michael Jackson's. Just to see if there were different things that I could learn or things that I'd never heard of before that he was willing to divulge. So yeah, and I'm pretty sure at the end of the book they actually said that, pardon me, this tea's making me burp. Pretty sure at the end of the book they were saying that he actually was on the fence about publishing the book for a little while and he almost wanted to scrap it. So I'm glad that he didn't. He does also have another book that I believe is more of like a poetry style book, but that one's super hard to get your hands on, so I've searched all online for it and I've found like places where you can purchase it, but the copies of the book are like astronomical, so hopefully one day I can read that. Then the next one that I read was Friends, Lovers and the Big Terrible Thing by Matthew Perry. Again, the theme here is memoirs and biographies. I just love them and I think they're so interesting. I will say as well, one thing that I should mention, especially when it comes with talk of someone's life, it's hard to rate the book in the sense of like that was a 2-star or a 5-star or whatever. And I don't really have a criteria for how I rate my 5 stars or just like rate my books in general. I kind of just rate it like, did I enjoy it? Did I learn something? Was it so captivating that I had to finish it? Then it was a 5-star. 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 And this one was so it was a mixed bag. It was captivating. It was really interesting because I do love Friends. I love Friends. It's literally one of my favorite TV shows of all time. So naturally I love Matthew Perry. But I will say that the one thing about this book that I didn't really enjoy is the way that Matthew Perry talked about women. And it's not necessarily that he talked of them in a degrading manner, but as he was writing this book in his later years, he reflects on his early years when he was really struggling with like the fame, alcohol, all that sort of jig. And I don't know whether or not he spoke about, for example, like the women in his life at that time from a biased standpoint or whether he tried to be as objective as possible, but regardless, the way that he spoke about the women was just like, ew, like disgusting, like, it's so gross. And when they literally weren't even like horrible, like the women were not even nasty or anything, so and that's what I'm getting from the book. But I do think that it gave me a new light to see alcohol and depression and addiction with, because those aren't topics that I've personally struggled with, but it is still interesting to me to read and try and get an understanding of what it's like inside someone's brain who has encountered those issues. So yeah, it was just, if you love Friends, you have to read this book. It's just a no-brainer, but again, just proceed with caution because yeah, it was just a bit like, I think it was just a bit confronting, if anything, because I just loved Matthew Perry and never really thought of him to speak of someone like that. But again, I don't know him personally, I'm just reading his book, so but yeah, I did really enjoy that one. It was still devastating though, because towards the end you have so much hope, but now that we know what has happened in his final days and since his passing, it's just like, well, that was kind of sad. So yeah. Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. Now this book I genuinely believe will become a modern classic. This book was insane. It was actually recommended to me by my beautiful friend Beck. She read it first and I remember her saying that it actually took her a little bit to get into, but then once she got into it, she did enjoy it and then ended up completing the book. I almost had the opposite. I loved it and I kind of wanted to savor it. So I was in a way prolonging the amount of time that it took me to finish the book whilst also still really wanting to read it. It was just such an amazing book. The actual story follows a young boy named, I think his name is actually Damon, but they nickname him Demon, and he has quite a rough start to life and an upbringing, and the story follows him throughout his life as he progresses and becomes older and all that sort of thing. And he has dealt with a really hard card, unfortunately. There's just no way around it. He's just not, dealt with a good set of cards. And despite that, he still, in my opinion, ends up being a really good person. And it was just like so touching, because you think, well, when you read about this kind of story, you think that you know what way it's gonna go, but this character, Demon, he pretty much just defied all of those expectations that you would have as a reader. And I just loved it. I would 100% reread this book. I would 100% recommend that anyone reads this book. It was just beautiful. Not that it is similar to A Little Life in any respect, but it's one of those books where I feel that it does deal with really heavy topics, but it also has the ability to make a very profound impact, which is kind of why I don't even want to say compare it to A Little Life, but think that it would kind of fall into a similar category of becoming a modern classic. It just has what it takes. The writing was absolutely beautiful. I almost felt like, why haven't I read this sooner? It was just so good. So I highly, highly recommend that you read Demon Copperhead. Freaking love that book. The next one that I read was Thirst for Salt by Madeleine Lucas. This book encapsulates Australian literature to a T. It is awesome. It kind of gives the same vibes as like Puberty Blues in a way, where it's just so bang on Australian. And it was, I don't even know, I think I actually got the recommendation from Slaggy Book Club here on YouTube. She's a really good YouTuber for recommendations, in case you want to check out her channel. I loved this book. It was a love story, but it's not a romance. And it was just so wonderfully written. It's not a very big book. Again, I think it's kind of just the standard like 300-ish pages. But I just loved it. There were so many things about it that just, I think because I'm Australian, that I connected with really well. I don't know how it would be perceived by someone who wasn't Australian and who didn't kind of have the same connection with certain little things. Like, it was just little things like, for example, use of language and colloquial language, slang, certain items that they would describe in the book, or like the environment around them and the sounds. Like, it's just so quintessentially Australian, and I just loved it. That's it. I just loved it. My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell was also a wonderful, wonderful read. Now, this wasn't wonderful in the sense that it was bright and it was a joy to read, because I don't know if a retelling is necessarily the correct term to use, but it is based off of Lolita. Now, I will preface this by saying I have read Lolita and I fucking hated it. I rated it a 1 star only because I had to actually give it a fucking rating, but I genuinely hated that book. I couldn't wait to finish it. I was buddy reading it with Beck and it was just disgusting. Like, I hated it. I just wanted to finish it for the sake of finishing it. Anyways, with that being said, My Dark Vanessa is based off of Lolita and I rated it a 5 stars. The reason why I rated it a 5 stars is because it was told from the perspective of the victim rather than being told from the perspective of the perpetrator, like in Lolita. And I think that because it was told from the victim's perspective, you go through the entire journey from the seed being planted in this young child's brain to it actually coming out into fruition. And although it is so devastating and it's horrible and it's something that you would never wish on anyone, it was fascinating. There's just no other way to put it. It was fascinating. It was, again, just, if this is something that is a sensitive topic for you, I probably wouldn't recommend that you read this book. So check the trigger warnings again. But it was just so good. It's hard to describe why a book is good without giving it away. So I apologize for not being able to go into great depth, but yeah, if you have read Lolita or you've heard about Lolita and it disgusts you, which it should because it's fucking gross, and you don't exactly want to read it or you don't want the same kind of perspective, then this is a good alternative because it does still discuss the topic at hand, but just in a different way. Pardon me. And yeah, it was just great. The next one that I read was Down the Drain by Julia Fox. I loved this book. Again, I chewed it up in like 2 days. It was so good. I didn't know a lot about Julia Fox prior to reading her autobiography, but that chick has lived a life. She has lived a freaking life. And it's one of those books where you can see the inevitable happening, and even when it does, it still shocks you. But you can also understand why she would have made certain decisions and how... Goodness me. You can see why her upbringing, why her surroundings and her influences led her to make certain decisions which would, again, inevitably change her life. And even though there were some really hectic things that did happen in the book, it's one of those stories where you also come away from it and you think like, but if that hadn't happened, then she wouldn't be in the place where she is. It's just like the butterfly effect, really. So yeah, really loved that book. That was so awesome. Then I read As Young as This by Roxy Dunn. I don't really remember too much about this book because I did read this at the start of the year in January. But what I do remember from this book was that it follows a female protagonist, and she, pretty much her timeline, I think of about 10 or 20 years, I can't remember, and the relationships that she has throughout the time. She has all sorts of relationships, and it's during the time where she's coming out of high school, she's turning into a young adult, and then she's transitioning through adulthood. And there was one situation in particular where I genuinely was like, like, why are you doing this? And it just frustrated me and it angered me, but not in a way where I wanted to put the book down and just stop reading it. It was more so like, I could see that she had the potential to understand her wrongdoings and to, in a way, make it right. So yeah, even though the book follows her journey through adulthood and the relationships that come with that journey, I wouldn't say that the book is necessarily just about the relationships that she has. You definitely get more of a share of just who she is as a person. I'm talking about the character, who she is as a person, and what it's like to be in the brain of a young female. So yeah, again, 5-star. Don't really remember like all the hectic details. I remember there was one partner that I really loved. I think he was like maybe the 4th or 5th partner. On the back of the book, it's literally got a list of like all the partners that she's had. I remember he was like such a sweetheart, but I can't even remember what his name was. Anyways, the next book, which is the second last book, and both of these books are actually by the same author. So, first one is called Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. Now, this was, I think, my second Riley Sager book that I had read. It was awesome. I'm pretty sure I just picked it up at the library because I had read the first one and I was like in love after that. And then went to the library and just wanted to see if they had any more of his work available, and they did, and it was Lock Every Door. This book, I remember feeling just like that perfect thriller feeling of like, what's gonna happen next? I need to know what's gonna happen. Page turning every damn minute. Like, this story was just insane, and right up until the end, it was just like turn after turn after turn. I genuinely felt like I couldn't keep up almost, but it was so good. But I will say that the first book that I read by Riley Sager, which is the next one I'm going to talk about, definitely took the cake. It was just, oh my gosh, The Only One Left by Riley Sager. It is hyped for a reason. This book is awesome. If you love thrillers, it is a really good book. Now, I've heard people say that they either love it or they hate it, so take it with a grain of salt. I personally loved it, and I do really love to read thrillers. So, yeah. But if you haven't already heard of The Only One Left by Riley Sager, it is a story about, pardon me, it is a story about a individual who needs to gain a job, and they're willing to pretty much, you know, take what they can at this point, just given their circumstances. Yeah. Anyways, so she gains this job working in this house that's like on top of the hill, and the actual house like has a history with the town and like all this sort of thing. So she's already like kind of aware of what has happened at this house, but she's like, like, you know, I need the job, I need the money, so I gotta do it. And anyways, she is caring for this person who was involved in an incident that happened at the house. And it is worth noting that this particular person that she's caring for doesn't seem to talk. And yeah, from the get-go, it's just fucking mysterious as fuck. Anyways, as the story unravels, you of course learn more and more about the person who doesn't speak, and then also what's happening inside the house. And it was just like plot twist after plot twist after plot twist. This is definitely up there with one of my favorite thrillers of all time. It was just like, I remember reading it and just thinking like, holy fuck, like this is insane. And the thing about thrillers is they're so good, they're thrilling, right? But I don't know if I could ever necessarily reread a thriller knowing what's going to come, because when you don't know and the suspense, is just building and building. That is what makes a thriller so good. And then if they can deliver on that, it's insane. So yeah, I won't say too much more about that one, but it was a very awesome book. Anyways, that wraps up all of the 5 stars that I've had in 2025 so far. Let me know if you enjoyed this book. This video. Sorry, girl. Let me know if you enjoyed this video. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. If you got any book recommendations, please let me know, because I love a good book and I love a 5 star. So yeah, bye.